And start, there's some other people, there's no parking out there right now, so Elsa, there's some people coming down the sidewalk. We'll give them a second to get here. Wow, thank you. This is going to be awesome, I hope. Except you're stuck with me for the first couple of minutes because I'm going to give you the cliff notes on the Battle of Kings Mountain, so you'll kind of have a background before what we get into the John. Just a couple of notes as people are coming in. Hey guys, we are going to be giving out those little dum-dum suckers at that, I always call it the Halloween madness, when they turn all the kids loose here on Main Street at the end of October. So if you see a bag of them around and it's, you know, a couple bucks, if you'll pick it up and bring it down here and donate it, we sure would appreciate it. Because last year we gave out over 1,000 suckers. And it was insane. It was fun. We are going to do Christmas trees again this year. The Christmas trees are upstairs, and as soon as I can finagle some of the Emory and Henry students to carry them down, it's easier to get them brought down than it is to have them taken back up at the end of the season, because those are heavy trees. And if you belong to a group or organization, or you just like to decorate trees, and you would like to bring your, we've got the trees, we've got some extension cords, bring the decorations, and it's free advertising for any business that you might be affiliated with or a group. We can do that. I want to, he's going to kill me, he's over there. I want to commend Max Wyatt. Number one, I don't know what we do without him. He runs his museum, it keeps us going. And Max applied for a grant through the Virginia Humanities over at UVA at Wise, and we got the grant. And I'll talk more about it in detail next month at our last meeting on a Sunday, but it's to make archival materials more accessible. We have so many documents that are fragile, and it's scary to even touch them. This way, they'll be scanned, and you can see the scanned copy, make a copy of it too. So we're working on that. And then next month, on the 19th of October, Michael Henningsen, is that right? Will be here. He's going to portray Lord Dunmore. And if you remember back from 4th grade, they talked about Lord Dunmore's war. And he will also talk about the muster grounds down in Abingdon, so that you can kind of pull all this meeting and next month's meeting, pull all that together, especially for the Virginia 250. I would like again to just thank our sponsors. It's really helped so much this year. Our bronze level is Cornett Jewelers, Custom Air, Fraser Seaver Brown Funeral Service, Royal Oak Eye Care, and Dr. Paul Brown. Our silver level sponsors are H.S. Williams, the Town of Chilhowie, and Royal Building Products of Marion. And our gold level sponsors, $500 or more, is the Bank of Marion and Slint Grant Saunders Insurance Agency. So a big thanks to them for supporting our programs and our museum. It's been fun, and to have a little bit of extra money to do new displays and put new things out. So, okay. I will start off boring you to death with me. Music is fun. Music makes it, I won't have to talk. So it's the ambiance. I just realized the other day I've been retired for 10 years, and my technology is way out of date, so I did the best I could. I was trying to just put together like real quick cliff notes on what a lot of people go, I've heard of Kings Mountain, but they didn't know it was in South Carolina. It's right across the line between North and South Carolina. So the Patriots from here, let's see, just get in it, hopefully. Oh, cool, okay. I love the quote by Thomas Jefferson saying that basically this was the thing that turned the tide of the war for the Patriot cause. And okay. Oh, it's not coming up on here. It's coming up there. That's fine. All right, just a real quick background. 1870. The war started. Well, the two first battles were 1775, but then you get to 1776 and all the things you're hearing about for next year. But it's 1780, and people are getting tired. The war doesn't seem to be going in the favor of the Patriots. And the British, under Lord Cornwallis, had South Carolina, were working up into North Carolina. And the Tories, the people who supported the British, there were some in this area. William Campbell took care of one, he hung him. But William Campbell, the hero of Kings Mountain, just if you were kind of against, if you were a Tory, you better watch out. And he caught one fella, and the guy was trying to run. They ran him down, hung him from a tree. But he did have papers on him that were showing that he was definitely supporting the Tory cause. Patrick Ferguson was the British commander down in North and South Carolina under Cornwallis. And he sent a letter, and the letter came here. Eventually went to Shelby and Sevier. You hear these, Sevierville, Tennessee, and Shelbyville. You hear all those names, and you just all of a sudden look, these are people that were definitely involved in the Revolution. And so Ferguson sent letters first to Shelby. Shelby ran them over to Sevier. And then they sent a letter to William Campbell and said, okay, we're in trouble. They want us to surrender, they want us to give up. Well, no. And William Campbell said, I don't believe this. He said, if they come, they're going to come down the Great Wagon Road. They are not going to come in any other way. But by the time the second letter arrived at William Campbell, he's like, okay, maybe we definitely need to think about this a little bit. Sevier was born in Virginia, moved down into Tennessee as well as Shelby. They were good buddies, military leaders. And it talks about the second letter. One lady I love to talk about when I was teaching class was Mary Patton. Awesome woman. You don't hear much about her because she, people didn't get around her a lot because she had a very distinct odor to her. She knew how to make gunpowder. And her gunpowder was made from bat poop. And she went into the caves and she scraped the poop off the walls and the floors, took it back and was able to mix it and created the gunpowder, 500 pounds of which went to the expedition that was heading to Kings Mountain. John Adair, he was cool. He was a frontiersman down in North Carolina, and he was the treasurer. And he had collected taxes for North Carolina. And when it came time for the expedition, it was like, we don't have any money. How are we going to pull this off? And so they went to him, and he said, well, I have all this tax money. And I haven't sent it in yet. And y'all are in North Carolina. So the money from it was supposed to have been borrowed. I think some was repaid to the state of North Carolina, but not all of it. And so what ended up to be like $12,000 went into paying for this. And it wasn't supposed to be a long thing. I remember teaching history, and we had these guys from the muster grounds come to my class, and we were talking about Kings Mountain, and they were talking to me, and I said, Mr. Keller, I got one question. I said, I teach out of this big, fancy U.S. history book, and there is half a sentence in that whole book on Kings Mountain. And he goes, well, that's because it was militia. It wasn't an official army event, it was just the militia. And that's why I didn't get the credit in the books that it should have gotten. I'm going to keep going. Arthur Campbell, I love this guy. He lived where Marion Middle School is. That was his property. He lived here in Marion. William Campbell's down at 7 Mile Ford. But, speaking of which, after this event, the replaying is at 4 o'clock at Aspenvale if you want to make a mad dash down there to the cemetery. He was born in Augusta County, captured by Indians when he was 15, ended up going up north with them, became the adopted son of a tribal leader there, escaped from them, met back up with the British, helped the British go to fight the Indians, eventually made his way back home to Augusta County. He married William Campbell's sister. It's all cousins and family members. And he rallied. He's the one who knew. You have 2 sons. You have 3 daughters. He knew everybody that lived in this area and how many kids, males especially, because all the guys were in the militia. And he rounded them up, and William Campbell was able to get 200 men and boys from this area to go to the Battle of Kings Mountain. And I think in a minute when John gives his talk about where these people, after the war, they came back home and they're buried here. And he's found so many of them. Ferguson, wealthy family, lawyers for his dad. He got hurt. He hurt his right arm pretty badly. It was pretty much useless, so he had to do everything left-handed. Cornwallis chose him. And he's the one that was responsible for writing these letters that made the frontiersmen so upset, especially at the bottom. I shall march this army over the mountains, hang your leaders, and lay waste to your country with fire and sword. And you did not say that to people from here. These guys had worked too hard to live here, settle, farm. This was their land. And there was also a couple other quotes which I can't repeat, but anyway. Ferguson thought Patriot militia was made up of backwater men, barbarians, and the dregs of mankind. Because they fought Indian style. They didn't march in their cute little uniforms and, stuff you hear in 4th grade. So the British didn't really think they had a problem with the militia. They're like, shit, big deal. What can they do to us? Okay. Real quick timeline, and that's kind of why the reflaying is this weekend and everything. Hey, Matt Prater. Early 1780, the letters come. Then there's a call to the militia. And William Campbell got 400 guys. And the bad thing was, they did not have uniforms, okay? They're going to wear their regular outside clothes, their own boots, their own guns, their own horses, their own food. And this was, they did really well. No pay. They would go down, they would fight, they would hopefully win, come back home, and go back to life as usual. Every 7th male in a family was asked to stay back home because there were still Indian attacks that were going on here, and they figured as soon as the Indians realized most of the men had taken off, there would be attacks from that part too. 23rd, they leave the Abingdon muster grounds, and then the 25th, they get down to Sycamore Shoals, and then they had 1,000 men with them. And the reason I've got 2 MIAs is somewhere between the 27th and the 29th of September, when they did roll call at night, 2 men were missing. And they figured they had defected, and they were going ahead to tell Patrick Ferguson that the colonials, the Patriots were headed his way. So what they did is they said, okay, we can't keep everybody together. We're going to have to split into 2 groups. One went one way, one went the other. It's all on this little chart down here. Met back up again. And then October 7th is the actual Battle of Kings Mountain. It started at 3, it was over at 4. It lasted 65 minutes is all it lasted. Quick, get in there. Then Cornwallis retreated. He had lost 1/3 of his army. Now, Cornwallis is the only British military person who was at the battle. All the rest were Tories, people that he had rounded up to fight on the British side. I was going to add something else in there. I'll think of it in a minute. British were totally surprised. The Patriots came in, and the cool part was, and I'm not sure if I put it in here, there were 2 guys, and I think they were with William Campbell's group, who had been hunting. They went deer hunting the previous year, and they knew the top of this. Sharon McCrum, who wrote a book called The Battle of Kings Mountain. Sharon came and talked to my class before I retired, and she told him, she said, mountain, it's a hill. It's not a mountain. Around here, it reminded me kind of the mountain behind downtown Saltville that goes up where the train. It's not much. I haven't been. Jeff, you and I are going to go eventually one day. But it had rained, things were mushy, and they had to keep their powder dry. It was a rough way to go. And the closer they got, and they also had a whole herd of beef cattle that were following along behind. So you've got all that to watch out for. And then you've got soldiers, and you've got horses, and it was a mess. So they picked their top men, and they said, we've got to move faster. We're going to pick the best of the best. We're going on. When they started, this kind of goes. When they started to fight, they could hear this whistle. And I'm like, what is that noise? And it was Patrick Ferguson. Here he is, commander. His right arm doesn't work. He's holding the reins with his left hand, and he's blowing this dang whistle, trying to give directions to his men as to what he needs them to do. And meanwhile, the Patriots, Campbell, Sevier, Cleveland was with them, they were all coming up the sides of this hill, and they were getting shot at. They'd have to retreat, they'd go back, they had to retreat, they'd go back, and the British couldn't shoot them because the British couldn't get their guns to fire right because they were shooting downhill. They weren't shooting straight across, and their aim was off. And the ones who tried to surrender, Patrick Ferguson went after them. He was screaming at them, yelling at them, and everything else to get them to get back in there and fight. Well, it didn't work. They ended up shooting, and I think that's on the next one. Well, this is the results. The leaders on one side, Ferguson against them, basically was 1,000 to 1,000 is how many men you had. Shelby and them had 500 close by that were still trying to catch up with the main group. And Ferguson had 200 waiting in the wings. But look at the difference. 29 Patriots killed 290 of the British supporters. And this got into, there was a slaughter or an attempted killing of a bunch of the captured. And Sevier and Shelby put an end to that. They said, this isn't what we're here for. But there was just a lot of hatred between the two groups. They called themselves, I always thought they called themselves the Over Mountain Men because they had to go over all these mountains to get down there. Then I found out, no, you goofed. It wasn't that reason. They had come, their families had come to Southwest Virginia, Tennessee, and North Carolina before the proclamation of 1763. They had come over the mountains and settled here before they were told they shouldn't come. It's in 65 minutes, and 1 year, I think it was 13 months, if you want to get precise, from the time the Battle of Kings Mountain was over until Cornwallis surrendered in Yorktown. So the victory, and then Cornwallis lost a third of his army because all the Tories that were supporting him, man, they were losing, and they just kind of went, yeah, I don't think so. And the mountain was shaped like a foot. They said, just think of the heel and the skinny part and then the toes, and I think Campbell was the part where the heel was. And John Brodie, the Brodie Cemetery, the replaying for him is today at 2 o'clock. They should be getting close to ending it. He was with Campbell, and there was a big debate. Linda, I guess you remember because we were at the DAR, we were at the laying of the wreath when Pat Hatfield gave her talk. There was a criticism of William Campbell for staying over, holding his horse's reins and staying out of the fight. When probably it wasn't William Campbell because he was in the middle of fighting. It was John Brodie, his manservant who had gone with him. I love this, old sweet lips, okay. Robert Ferguson was shot at least 7 to 9 times, because that's how many bullet holes they found in him. But the guy that claims to have shot the shot that killed him was with his gun called Sweet Lips, and his name was Robert Young. Ferguson is buried along with his mistress, who was with him the whole time, down at the bottom of the hill. And they buried him, and then they took rocks and piled on top of his grave because they honestly didn't know. Those 2 guys that had defected, had gone missing, had warned Ferguson, and Ferguson had sent word to Cornwallis that he needed some backup. But the backup never got there. But Campbell and Sevier and those guys, they didn't know that the troops weren't like on the way. So they piled rocks up, and the theory is that if you go down there today, you pick up a rock from home, and you take it and you put it on his grave. And it's like, you shouldn't have messed with these guys. All right. Okay, let's see. Yep, there is a list. There are books, and I meant to grab mine. I went out the door and honestly forgot it. But there's a book because you had 1,000 guys basically from this whole area of Virginia, North Tennessee, and North Carolina who were at this battle or participated in this battle or helped herd the cattle, but they were part of the group. And there are books that have their names in it so that they are kind of immemorialized. And even though they weren't officially Army members, because they were on the Patriot side, they can claim entrance to the DAR or the SAR. if you can go back and prove it, and their records go on. And that's it. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to John. You probably know Rose, but they're the cool couple. And I met John, how many years ago?
4 years.
Okay, something like that. Yeah, I love old cemeteries, and my students and I went out a couple years and did cemeteries and did research and took pictures and cleaned them up. And then he comes along and he loves them as much as I do, but he has documented where these fellas are buried here in the county. So if y'all will welcome John. Thank you.
So you introduce myself a little bit here. You got my name there, and
See, it's not shown.
there we go. By way of background, I'm what's known as a geospatial specialist. It's a big word. Oh, I'm sorry, that's a big word. You may not really think about what it means, but I was trained as a geographer back in the day before computer mapping. Along with that, I became an air photo interpreter and worked for the government for many years with access to national level materials. And over time, of course, computers came along, mixed all that together, and they're hard to separate in the course of work. So they devised this new term, geospatial analyst. Well, of course, it bleeds over into personal life as well. I think the reason I became a geographer, got into this business, was because as a kid I loved highlights and the find the hidden picture in the back of the magazine. Where's Waldo always fascinated me, and so I spent 30 years looking for Waldo and the hidden pictures, only they sometimes had somewhat more nefarious intent in mind. So I became interested in cemeteries in the course of researching my own family. We first arrived in the New World, in New Sweden up in Pennsylvania back in 1650, and didn't stay there long. They hit the frontier, some went west, some went south. I do have an extended family member here in the county that's buried at Southwestern Hospital Cemetery. She died in 1926, and William Likins, her husband, were there. So that's my interest level here. And I like to know where things are. In some of the history, I'm not a historian. I'm certainly not the expert about Smyth County. That would be all of you. So if you see something as we go along here, take note and let me know, because all my work here is an aggregation. It's from some two specific bodies of work. And that's my main source, backed up with some field visit and some other online materials. So out of the 200 that Annalee mentioned, there are about 40 that we know where they're buried. This is a map of the county, and you can see the graves marked in there, and the little legend down in the bottom. The oval is a private cemetery, it's on private property, required to access. And then the square with the rectangular is on public property, churches or open public cemeteries. And just so you know, we did print off, in the folder up here, is a printed copy of this with the list of the names on the back of it that you're welcome to. And the materials I have here, I haven't had a chance to talk to Max, but I was going to leave a copy with you if you want to put it on the website or however you want to deal with it. So these are the names, and these come from the Lyman book, which is just a short reference to the official book using the 2020 edition of it. The names in bold black, we know where they are, we know where the cemetery is. The ones in red, no idea. And there's one, oh I'm sorry, they don't have a tombstone. The ones in italics, we have no idea where they're buried. but they were in the book listed as veterans of the war.
From Smyth
Hmm?
County.
From Smyth County. And what's interesting here is you'll see there are a number, about 5, 6, 7 of these guys that are buried at St. Clair Primitive Baptist Church. If not all of them, most of them were from New York. And my understanding, again, I'm not the historian here, but my understanding is that one of them married down here and the others came and joined. So they're all buried down there together, but they originally came down from New York. And these were the sources I'm talking about. That's a pretty long title on the left there. And then the one on the right is just referred to as the J-Lark study. They're complementary. I think the one on the left has a few more names, a little bit more data in there. Important thing to keep in mind, while this is the official record, to the best of my understanding, it was not based on field research. It was based on submissions provided to them by people. So some of that involves family history and memory, which we all know at our age is the best there ever was. These are images of the tombstones that are online. There's a website called findagrave.com. I kind of wish it had a different name, but that's what it is. And anyone can create a memorial page with the person's information on it, where the cemetery is. And most people usually provide a photo of the tombstone if they visit. So you see quite a variety of stones, somewhat based on wealth and status of the individual and also timing. I think one of the interesting things to me is you'll see there are a number of them, including John Brody's, come back to that in a second, are modern day Veterans Administration gravestones. So someone at some point did the research, submitted the application for these, and had them installed. They would be sent to you. And you can also see that there are a number that do not have that stone. So if someone had the interest and wanted to do that, that is something that's still out there, that for some of these gentlemen, they could still be provided with the Veterans Administration headstone. John Brody, his name gave me some trouble when I first started researching all this down here, because on the grave, on the headstone, is B-R-O-O-D-Y. In other places, it's B-R-O-A-D-Y, and in some places, it's B-R-O-D-Y. So over the span of generations, you see the name spelled differently, partly due to a lot of people didn't know how to read and write, so their names are written down by someone else who spelled it the best they could. My family name is Likins, pronounced like the moss, and it has several different spellings. Sometimes within the same generation, the son's name was spelled differently from the father's name. So move along here. This is how I aggregated the data. I just used a simple spreadsheet. The name of the cemetery is in the left column there, and the URL there is the link to the Find a Grave website. So these are all linked to that. So if you open the spreadsheet, you can access it. And I'll also show you in a minute from the software from how that works. But I did put the coordinates in there, and whether or not it's private or public, the source page from the J-Lark book, and then the source page for the Lyman book. So that was a little bit time consuming to do that, because I couldn't really do it until I figured out where they were, so I started with the blank sheet. Fortunately, a lot of these coordinates were provided in the book and were accurate. That's not always the case. So again, back to the sources, we already talked about this, but the bottom two there, findagrave.com and ancestry.com, and then genealogical websites and other, anything you can find on the internet. And of course, the book I had access to because of the library. The Virginia history, the local history room there has a great deal of resources, including Sturgill's 1995. It's a 4-volume survey of cemeteries in the county, invaluable for some of the other work I did. Now this is actually, I'm going to show you the actual software I use. This is the, which one came up? Good. This is for the next set. I've kind of broken this into 2 parts. I wanted to talk specifically about the Revolutionary graves, and then talk more generally about the county. Let's see if this works. Come on, big guy. I'll do this. You want to play games with me? There we go. This swirl of color and lines, and probably you're looking at it going, what in the world is he talking about? This is called QGIS, Geographic Information System. This is the modern day mapping environment. It's this particular project. There are a lot of these software that can be bought, and they're expensive, and they're complex, they're robust, and as a result, they're complicated. They're not particularly easy to use. This one is totally free, available online. You download it, you got it, and it has a lot of resources available to work from. So this is just showing, I'm going to go out to the full layer here. That is the world right there. And if I seem a little nervous, I am. Because this, I think, is the first time ever that I actually did a presentation of something like this in front of my lovely life partner, Rose. And she is so polished and so perfect at this stuff. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm going to have to do this. But here I am. No, so that's the whole county right there. And I can turn all the buttons on and off for you and go through it, and it's not going to change anything. But these are all these locations are based on Sturgill's survey work, personal visits by myself, what other people have told me, from findthegrave.com, from Anna Lee's school project work, and as a result, you have a myriad of sources to deal with and to deconflict. Some places different names for the same location, and so I use a spreadsheet to work through all that. And at this point in time, I think it's pretty darn accurate as to all these locations. Now the other interface, this is from Google Earth, which people may be a little bit more familiar with. The map base you see here is from the United States Geological Survey. These maps are from the one on the right is from 1935, the one on the left is 1958. The reason I bring that up is these early maps had cemeteries marked on them, some named, some not named. And the ones that weren't named, later on in the course of the computer transition to computer-based, these locations sort of got lost. Only the named ones were transferred into the data records. And so I wanted to mention that, and I'll come back to it. So here's one here. Right. So what I did was I took that spreadsheet I showed you, and it's in the background for this. And again, this file that I'm working from is a KMZ file. It's a very small file, but it's available to anybody. I'll leave a copy with Max. And you can load it up on your computer at home. Google Earth is, easy to get if you're interested. And in the process, it's linked to the cemetery on this Find a Grave page. And I linked to the cemetery rather than the individuals because there are multiple individuals at the same cemetery, and it got very confusing. But you can do a search and you can find them in there. The only other thing I really wanted to touch base on this. I did want to again hit on the point of the sources. We talk about these gentlemen that went off to fight in the war, and it's easy to focus on the people that make the history book in some way, but don't forget about all the families that gave up, that contributed to this cause, the wives, the sons, the daughters, who supported them while they were away, and supported them at home when they were preparing for all this. And I say that because, history, we tend to hear about history and read about history as these monolithic entities doing things. The government did this, country A did that, country B did the other. Real living people made those decisions, and that's really important to remember. That it's not some conglomerate, some mass entity acting. There were real live individuals responsible for all those things that happened, including all of us that didn't really have a clear voice in it, but by our daily actions and interactions, what we do, what we say, we're all part of that history. So when you're doing research on something like these cemeteries, all of you are a very important resource because everybody has a little bit of memory of their family's involvement, where their family is buried, and family members. Big cemeteries are easy to find. What I've really been focused on are the small family cemeteries that either already have disappeared from the face of the earth or are about to, because nobody remembers them. I've gone through here, talked about the library and the librarians there are a great start for looking at things. Newspapers that are available online or in microfilm or hard copy. Funeral homes, they're sort of hit and miss because their records are a business record, really. And so what record they may have of people buried there is pretty thin. The data of how much it cost and who paid, and sometimes that's it. I mentioned findthegrave.com. There's another similar website called Billions of Graves, which is not, in my opinion, that's useful. And the next two are easily forgotten. Your county, Smyth County, has an absolutely outstanding GIS property management system. Manuel Street over there has been very helpful in working with me and talking to me about these things. And they had records in there of some of the cemeteries. Well, as it turns out, in Virginia, if you have a family cemetery marked in the deed transfer, it was picked up as all these records were digitized. And so it's in the county records And a couple of places where I have found that there's an unnamed cemetery, and it's in the county record, it's still unnamed. I was able to go back through the deeds to the first time that cemetery showed up in the deeds, which leads me to think that that family, that the cemetery belonged to that family. Not 100%, right? But it's a clue. So when you go back to a deed from 1925, and you have a clue as to who the cemetery belonged to at that time, so you can begin looking for some names. So along with that, the county GIS, the clerk's office, they've been incredibly helpful, showing me how to use their software and research the records and get printouts and stuff. The United States Geological Survey, they have a master database that's hard to access now. I mean, for years it's been hard to access because nobody really uses it. And it's called the Geographic Names Information System. Remember I mentioned that some of the cemeteries were named on the maps? Those are the ones that went into the GNIS. All right. What I want to show you here is going back to the 1935 and the 1958 maps. You can see on the map, it just says cemetery, right? That's over there on Rigby Street. That is right up from our neighborhood, Larry. But the other reason I'm nervous is my big, bad, mean neighbor, Larry Sayer, is sitting over here, and, you know, I don't want to cross him off. But this is just up from our neighborhood, and I've been up looking for it, thinking, you know, how hard is it to find a cemetery? Boy, is it hard. That whole corner was so overgrown that you can't see anything. And I was tromping around all over there, and of course I'm not from here, and you know, trying to wear bright clothes, and hoping no one gets too over eager about getting somebody off their property. If I see a house, you know, I'll go knock on the door and ask permission first, you know. But anyway, I was up there walking around, and I was in front of this house that was boarded up, and I was like, well, it's not here. And this truck pulls up. I'm like, oh boy, here we go. And a very nice gentleman, Mr. Taminger, who lived down the hill, got out and asked if he could help, and I told him what I was looking for, and he says, yes, I know exactly where that is. Let me walk you up there. And he took me up there, and it was so thick with overgrowth in there, I had to come back another day with a machete to cut into it. Of course, I had to re-engage my southern roots. I grew up in Caroline County, up near Richmond. And Caroline County is a lot like Smyth County, only without the hills. It's very flat. And so I learned, you know, kind of went back to my roots of, you know, just chatting with people about the wind, if nothing else. And Mr. Taminger had quite a tale to tell. We were out there for quite a while talking. And then, of course, I had the opportunity to search the hillside for him looking for a pair of flippers he could drop. Distracted me from my task at hand for a while. But anyway, I did go back, and I went into that area with a machete, and I did find 2 headstones for the Henninger family, or Henniger, as some people say. I could not see any others, but the periwinkle and some of the other grassy ground cover is pretty thick, so they may have fallen over, and I just didn't see them. So I did the thing I'm supposed to do, and went online and created a page in findthegrave.com for it, entered the information that I had for the grave. About 3 weeks later, I went back to check to see if the pictures had uploaded correctly. And to my excitement, someone else had added like 7 or 8 memorial pages to the site of the Anderson family, and they included pictures from their genealogical collection, I'm guessing. And so it was rewarding to see that had made the possibility for them to contact with a physical location for their family. So that's part of what motivates me with this, is the community that engages in this is active that way. So that's a long story around saying that I downloaded all these maps, like you see here, and put them in the geographic software I was talking about. And while pretending to listen to Rose, I was driving along, staring at this map, looking for all those unnamed cemeteries, like this one, and putting a marker out there, and again, deconflicting with information we already had. Is this a known cemetery? Does it have a name? And a lot of them did. A lot of them, that was fairly straightforward. But I'm down to where I have about 11 of these locations that were not in the county database. They're not in the Sturgill book. I've not been able to find anything on them in any other source. So they're just marked as unknown. And those are the ones I'm really interested in. I think it's important to honor and remark on the people that came before us. We all depend on what they did, one way or another. So some of these unknown ones are in pretty inaccessible places. One is up in the National Forest Reserve behind Saltville, a couple miles up in the hills there. So it would be a real slog to get up there. But if anyone knows anything about those, that would be one. And the last thing, these are some of the other sources that I use. There's the Annalise project there on the left. So a bad picture. The work is really nice, but I didn't want to mess with the plastic holder sleeves, so the picture is a little off there. But then out of Anita Smith down in Poor Valley, she had 2 volumes of a book, a collection of Poor Valley memories. And in there were some pictures of cemeteries like this. Some she had information in there on where it was and who it was, and others it was just a picture of a cemetery somewhere in Poor Valley. Where is it? So those are things I'm still working on. And then the ultimate last thing, and I will shut up. This is from Google Earth. And the name of the cemetery is St. John Cemetery. That's the last name of the family. And I knew the general area of it from Sturgillsburg, but I did not know exactly where it was. And using the satellite imagery, you can see here, and this is a big clue as an imagery analyst, as a photo interpreter. You're looking for color, pattern, change, and you're looking at it over time. Great thing about Google Earth, it has coverage from current to about 1985, so you can go by and compare what's changed in the area to some degree. But here's a nice rectangular feature, trees right in the middle of an agricultural field. Why on earth would they not farm that over? Because it's a cemetery. And so that's just a real life example of work I do, of using those types of clues to go in and identify something. So when you're driving down the road and you look over in a field and you see a patch of trees out in the middle of the field, that is either a very wet spring that they can't farm through, or a house site, or possibly a cemetery. So this is something. That's all I have.
Do you all have any questions you'd like to ask John?
Yes, sir.
You put the map side by side, current map, historic map.
Yes.
Are there, in the GIS, QGIS software would allow you to do that, or is that something you had to cut and paste?
Well, this was just a cut and paste, but yes, there is a method to do that in there. Usually, what I do in practice is I just put them both there in layers and I sit over the check mark and turn it on and off. There's a fancier way of doing it.
And outside of the Google Earth pictures out there, which vary in degree of clarity,
Yes.
are there any other sites from GIS or others that you can pull up?
County GIS site. It has very good coverage from 2013 and 2019, I think it is. Both, and this is an important thing to think about if you ever use this material, is what time of year is it that you're looking at? If it's summertime, there's a lot you're not going to see because of leaf cover. In the winter, there's a lot you're not going to see due to potential snow cover or bad lighting. But April is the sweet spot. The leaves haven't come back on, the light is good, the weather is usually fair, and there's some great coverage in April timeframe.
One last question, on Esri itself, can you do the same, you can do layering that's already in the system, can you do add-ons like what you've done?
For the Google Earth?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
It's Google Earth is much better as a visualizer, as showing something. It can be a little difficult to keep things straight in there. Just because of the way the layers work. And I'll tell you, if you go to use it, save, save, save. Every time you make an entry, save. Because it's easy for the thing to suddenly go bonkers. It may take a second to zoom out. So this is just Alabama. All these locations are cemeteries where someone, well, I'll zoom out for that's the United States and Canada. These are sites where people that I believe to be ancestors, extended family, are buried in the United States. There are 6 basic variations of my name. But pretty much, the nice thing about having a name like that is when you see it, yeah, you can pretty much count on it being a family member. There is 1 or 2 lines of the name that go back to Ireland or Germany, but since we originally came from Sweden, I'm thinking that maybe the people in Ireland and Germany are related to some Vikings that got lost on the way. I don't know. I mean, I'm just saying, it's a possibility. And, you know, I've worked with this for quite a few years now. I'm stupidly proud of it. But here we are. I just found one the other day over in the Philippines. And there are some, of course, in Europe, soldiers' graves where they're buried overseas.
John, was there one section of the county that had more Revolutionary War graves than another? Or?
No, not particularly. It was more, the geographic spread was more like either side of the main valley. You know, where 81 goes. It seems like most of the cemeteries were either north or south of that line. But otherwise, the cemeteries are fairly evenly distributed. And some of them, they were buried here, like the Henbacker. I'm sorry if I messed up the name. But there's a listing for him in the Morgan Cemetery. But in digging into it, he was likely re-entered in Tazewell County. So he was initially very eager, but didn't move. So there's some of that happened.
How easy or difficult have you found it to get on the property?
The hardest part, honestly, I have yet to be yelled at or chased away. All right. The hard part is finding someone to contact. You know, on a Saturday afternoon, chances of someone being home or hitting this to go act. Now the other thing that the county GIS database is really useful for, because there's a mailing address there for the property owner. No email or phone. So what I do is I write a letter explaining what I'm doing, and a copy of the map that I'm working from, and put in a self-addressed stamp envelope inside, and say, you know, I would appreciate any information that you might have, and if I could contact you about access to the cemetery. And that usually works out pretty well. It's just the time to get that going. And some people respond, some people don't. My son and I do this. He lives in Orange County, and we've done some of this there as well. And there have been a couple times where we pulled up to where the cemetery is supposed to be, and you kind of look at the property, and you're like, yeah, I don't feel like being shot today, so we'll do this another time. And, you know, when they've got multiple no trespassing signs that keep out on the front gate, it's like, yeah, okay, they mean it. Yes.
We learned, you know, a family cemetery where my mother grew up at Holston Mills, John Shannon, you know, Revolutionary War. That's a surprise to us, which is nice. My question is though, cemeteries on private property, are there protective easements or anything that?
It varies. Under Virginia law, if it is recognized, if it's in the deed, there are protections. Otherwise, it's just another piece of ground. And unfortunately, I've encountered one or two here, and in other places more, where not only did the graveyard disappear because the family moved away or whatever, but there was a conscious decision to clear it off to return it to agricultural production. Now they didn't move the bodies; they just tore up the headstones and got rid of them. And in some places, and yeah, I'm not. I don't bring this up as an accusation to anybody. Life is what it is. Life moves on. And money is money, and time is time. So as a farmer or anyone else, when I need to put cattle out in the field, do I have the time and the money to make sure that the fence is in place around the old cemetery up there that nobody's asked about in 20 years? So lots of times these cemeteries get trampled under by cattle, by livestock. It's unfortunate, but it happens. Yes?
John, after several hundred years, I would think that fallen headstones might be covered not only with vegetation, but with soil as well.
Absolutely.
Does something like ground-penetrating radar is useful?
Absolutely. If you want to loan me about $10,000 or $15,000, I would do that. They're expensive. That said, I haven't done this, but I think that just a metal detector would give some indication of a stone near the surface. I don't know. I haven't researched. I have researched on some of the state of Virginia has an office, a very small office, for the protection of cemeteries. And you can fill out a form and submit your location to them, and they judge whether or not it meets the criteria. and that will give it some protective status. They also support surveys of more, let's say more important sites. That's not really the word I'm looking for, but, and good developers also do a pre-building survey. And I know, for example, in Caroline County, near the Lake of the Woods, Lake Caroline, which is a big housing development, there were several family cemeteries there and all, and there was one that was particularly pretty sizable. And they contracted with a company to come out and do a full survey that was very in-depth, that resulted in a gridded out pattern marking where each grave was. And they didn't use GPR, the ground penetrating radar. But I found this very interesting. And I kind of want to try it, but it's a fair amount of work, so I'm lazy. They put rods in the ground on a grid basis, and they're wired together, and they hook it up to a power source, and they note the variance in electrical output at each location, which gives them an indication of whether or not there's a disturbance in the ground there. And then from that, they work, well, is it a grave or is it something else? But a lot less expensive than a ground penetrating radar. Yes.
Yeah, I was
Wait a minute, let her go first.
No, he's the technology one. I
Oh,
have to
okay.
ask him.
All right.
Yeah, we're together, it's okay. Because he's really big about not trespassing, and yet I've
Yeah.
seen him hop a fence. In his defense, he does have, go ahead.
Yeah, so before I hopped the fence, I went back to check state law. So Virginia Code 57-27.1 allows a family member to, if you could prove you were a descendant,
Right.
to go into the graveyard. However, they can come back and specify what hours you can.
Right.
And they can, if you have not had anyone buried, visited, or maintained in 25 years, they can petition to have it returned to land, but it has to be public notice.
It's right and dead right too.
Right? Yeah, I usually err on the side of caution.
I live way out in the boonies, so I have to really be careful because they'll shoot you.
No, I totally understand. I talked to some other people in this pursuit, and I've had people say, well, you just tell them you're gone. I'm like, okay, you do that. See how that goes. But yeah, you're right, absolutely right. The law is such that they have to allow access by family members upon an agreed upon schedule. And if I recall correctly, it does mention genealogy research somewhere in
It
there,
does.
which falls in a slightly different category. But it's not a guarantee, it's a negotiation, which as it should be. I wouldn't want people jumping all over my property. Yes, ma'am.
I think it's a real travesty that so many young people in the generations now are being cremated, and then they're not being buried.
Right.
And they're just little things of ashes around people's houses. And I think there'll be less of those little cemeteries.
Yes. It's very true in Europe and other parts of the world because land use is, there's higher demand for the land use. And so cremation is a preferred method in many parts of the world. At least in England, the general custom is, even if you're cremated, they're inurned. So if you go to a national cemetery like Arlington, Virginia Western, there's usually a columbarium somewhere on the property where people that were cremated are. We went to my nephew's graduation from Northwestern out in Chicago, and we drove, and we stopped in Indiana to go to a cemetery where a number of Likins were buried. And I went up to the mausoleum, the columbarium, And it was something like right out of science fiction. It was this big, stone, dark, brooding building, you know, with no windows. And they had these doors in their front that were like 20 feet tall. And, you know, huge one. When I was walking up, I kind of expected some alien to come out of the door. and you go inside, and there's you know, a little chapel or whatnot and all. And then there are signs, you know, by section of where people's urns are. And I'm going down, and there are like window cases, like, you know, like a bookshop. And there are urns in there, and it was apparently a very popular motif to have your urn designed as a set of books with people's names on it sitting in the window. Yeah, it just struck me as odd. But it was different. All right. Like I said, I'm going to leave a copy of all this with Max. Copies of the map are up here. And my email, likinsjf@gmail.com. If you have a follow-up question or you know where there's a cemetery, I appreciate it. Thank you.